issues in terms of trade, but in general, the issues are much, as that we have a free trade agreement, it's much easier now. But there's a lot going on in terms of the economy. And one of the things is a lot of people are talking about the next recession, so I'm going to talk about that to see if we see a recession in the next few years. I'll keep the answer for a bit later. But also what I want to talk about is a bit further. So my presentation has 3 parts, but basically I'm going to do 2 things. First, I'm going to give you a perspective about the next 12 to 24 months. So what should we expect in terms of the economy, both for the world and for Ontario, for the next 12 to 24 months. And finally, I'm going to talk about a more long-term approach. What should we expect for the next 5 to 10 years? So I'm going to talk about 3 trends that are going to have an impact on our businesses, but more for the next 5 years or even for the next decade. So first, let's talk about the world economy. As you know, both the Canadian and the Ontario economy, they're both very open economy to the world. So that's the reason why I always start with the world economy, because what's going on around the world is really having an impact here. So first, the world economy is actually running quite well. It's quite positive. We have 3.7% growth, which is the best growth we have seen since the last recession. And the reason for that is commodity prices are increasing, which is helping countries who are producing those commodities. Countries like Brazil, Russia, but also Canada. As you know, we produce a lot of commodities, like a lot of metals. Our mining and oil industries are very important in Canada. So as a result, the world economy is improving. Actually, for the first time in more than 2 decades, there's no recession around the world. There's no country who are in recession right now. We haven't seen that for about 20 years. So this is a good news. And we believe that this growth is going to continue for the next few years. But of course, I think you will agree with me that the most important economy outside Canada for Canadian is the US economy. 75% of Canadian export are going to the US. 85% of Ontario export is going to the United States. So obviously what's going on in the US is very important for us. And the news are good. If you look at the graph, the expectation is growth is going to be close to 3% this year, which is quite amazing because for a mature economy like the US, for the size of that economy, 3% growth is a lot of growth. And the single most important reason for that is the tax reform. As you know, Mr. Trump has reduced taxes massively by $150 billion, and as a result, is stimulating an economy that was already doing very well. The unemployment rate in the US is now 3.7%. This is actually the lowest unemployment rate for the last 50 years. So when Mr. Trump is saying that the economy is performing well he's right on this one. The economy is performing very well. Actually, the question in the US is not so much, is the economy performing well? I think everybody agrees on that. But is how long this growth is going to be sustained? A lot of people are talking about the next recession. A lot of people are saying, well, after 10 years of growth, we should have a recession. Well, actually, recession doesn't happen like that. It just don't happen because we had a long period of growth. You need a shock, or you need interest rate to increase drastically or significantly to slow down the economy. So first of all, the shock. We don't see any unbalance in the US economy. Like in 2007, there was a housing bubble that really exploded in 2007. That created the massive recession that we know. There's no housing bubble in the US economy right now. There's no regulation in the financial sector has been much more strict than before. The debt ratio of American consumer is still very low, even after 10 years of growth. The debt ratio of businesses is still low. The debt ratio of government is increasing, but the US government is so huge that they can afford it. So there's no imbalance that we can see that is going to provoke a recession. The second part is interest rate. Yes, interest rates are increasing, and I'm going to talk about that more specifically, but they are increasing. But are they going to cause a recession? Well, this graph is helping us to understand that. On the graph right now, you see 2 lines. The light blue is interest rate in the US for the last 40 years. And the dark blue is inflation for the last 40 years. As you can see, we are right now in low inflation, low interest rate years. So this is a good news. Because when inflation is low, you don't have to increase interest rate to control the price. So despite the fact that growth has been going on for 10 years, inflation is still low in the US. So the Federal Reserve, the central bank, doesn't have to increase interest rate very quickly to control inflation. They will increase interest rate because the economy is running so well. But there's no pressure to go very rapidly, which should avoid us to have a recession. So we don't see a recession in the numbers. We don't believe there's going to be a recession. But there's going to be a slowdown. This is the game plan that we see. Strong growth in the US for this year and also for 2019. In 2020, the combination of two factors will slow down the economy. First, the tax reform is going to be over. So the impact on the economy is going to be gone. Second, interest rates are increasing, which is going to slow down the economy. So we believe that the US economy is going to slow down in 2020, and this is going to have an impact on the rest of the world, including, of course, Canada, because we are a very important trade partner. But so far, we don't see a recession, we see more a slowdown. So what does it mean for Ontario and for Canada? Well, we'll start with the Canadian economy. The Canadian economy had very solid growth last year, 3% growth. This is very high for Canada because our actually potential growth is about 2%. What is potential growth? It's like your own business. You have a potential, at the point where you refuse contract because you're out of capacity, well, in the economy is exactly the same thing. For the Canadian economy, it's about 2% growth. Over that, we are over our capacity. So that's what happened last year. We're going back slowly to a more potential growth. The growth in Canada is going to be around 2% this year and 2% next year. Why is it not 3%? Well, interest rates are increasing, which is slowing down consumption and also the housing market. So that's the main reason why the growth is going to be very solid, around 2%, but that is not going to be 3% as last year. And growth is going to be in most part of the country. Actually, in every part of the country except Newfoundland, who are still in the recession. Ontario is going to have a similar growth in Canada, 2.1%. Quebec and BC are going to lead the country this year with growth around 3.4%. So let's talk a bit more about Ontario. The Ontario economy had an amazing growth over the last few years. 4 years of growth over 2.5%. That's very significant. That was one of the best growth in the country with British Columbia. But as you can see from the graph, we expect to see the growth to slow down this year. Most important reason is interest rates are increasing. So this is the case in most part of the country. Also, exports are slowing down. So let's see what's going on in the Ontario economy. By the way, 2% growth it's full capacity. The Ontario economy, just like the Canadian economy, is running right now at full capacity. So first, our export, which has been very important to create a strong economy in Ontario, they have reached a plateau. They're still very high, as you can see from the graph. The volume is high, but they have not been able to increase anymore. The reason is our export in the automotive sector has been slowing down. In the rest of the economy, the Ontario export keep increasing. But as a result, the total Ontario export is actually plateauing. So this is not going to create a lot of growth in the economy. That's one of the reasons why we're going to have 2% growth and not 2.5. Business investment has been very strong, and they have been slowing down at the beginning of the year. We believe that all the uncertainty around NAFTA has created uncertainty around business investment. We believe that business investment are going to be positive at the end of the year as NAFTA, the deal has been signed. So people don't have this uncertainty around how much, what is going to be the next trade negotiation with the US. So we believe that business investment are going to keep up. Third element is government spending. As you can see from this graph, in the last 3 years, government spending has been very strong in Ontario, which has been helping the growth of the economy. That's one of the reasons why growth was so high. But we have a new government with a new philosophy. So I would be very surprised if next year government spending is increasing by 3.5%. I see more, in our forecast, we more believe that the growth is going to be around 0 because the deficit is very high, so they will have to do something about that. So that's another element explaining why growth is not going to be that high. Finally, the most important factor is interest rate. The graph that you see is the interest rate payment by consumer. So the yellow lines show you that Canadians are paying more in terms of interest rate payment than they used to. This is a huge increase over the last 2 years. As interest rates are increasing, people who have, especially people who have mortgages, they have to spend more on paying the interest rate. As a result, they don't have as much money to spend in terms of consumption. So on the graph that you see, the yellow line represents the interest rate payment, and the blue line represents the revenue growth. For the first time in 10 years, actually, interest rate payments are increasing more rapidly than revenue growth. This is the reason why in both Ontario and in Canada, the economy is not going to grow as much. As interest rates are increasing, the growth is going to be a bit lower because it's having an impact on consumption. Consumption is still increasing. The job market is still very solid, but it's not increasing as much as in the past. And the housing market is starting to slow down. It's still very elevated, but it's a bit lower than last year. Especially resales are slowing down, and prices are going to stay at about the same level, but they are not going to keep increasing. So we are starting to see the impact of higher interest rate on the economy. So the job market is still very solid. The Ontario unemployment rate is 5.6%. This is the lowest unemployment rate in 40 years. So this is a sign that the Ontario economy is running at full capacity. And just like your business, when you cannot accept another contract because you're just running at full capacity, well, this is exactly where we are in terms of the economy. So it's a nice place to be, but at the same time, it's going to limit our growth in the next few years. So that's the reason why the economy is going to continue to grow at a very solid pace, around 2% for the next 2 years. Growth is going to come from business investment, still from consumption, but not at the same rate as we have seen over the last 4 years. So this is the first part of the presentation. It's about what's going to happen in the next 12 to 24 months. As we can see, we're still in the period of growth. Our economy is in a very good place. We are running at full capacity, both in Ontario and in Canada. Actually, in Canada, Quebec, Ontario, and BC, the 3 biggest provinces, are running at full capacity. They have the lowest unemployment rate ever, both like in the 3 provinces. So this is a very good place to be. And we're still going to benefit from growth for the next few years. However, when we look at the more long term, we have something to watch for. And this is the last part of my presentation. As business people, we believe that there's 3 factors that you should watch for the next 5 years. First, I'm going to talk about interest rate, how they are going to increase. Second, about the aging population. And third, about technology. So let's talk about interest rate. As you know, both in Canada and the US, both economies are running very well. They are running at full capacity. Unemployment rates are at historic low. So there's no need to keep interest rate low to stimulate the economy. So that's the reason why we're seeing interest rate increasing in both countries. In the US, interest rates have been increasing 3 times since the beginning of the year, and we believe there's going to be another increase in December. In Canada, interest rates have been increasing 3 times as well. Now the prime rate is at 1.75. So what is going to happen now? How interest rates are going to increase? Are they going to increase? Well, in Canada, the governor of the bank have said that they are going to increase in the next few years. They want to raise interest rate to 3%, to have it like a neutral rate. What is a neutral rate? is actually when the interest rate doesn't have an impact to stimulate the economy.